Welcome once again to MREA's Exploring Energy series, a monthly webinar series where we tackle renewable energy and clean energy topics impacting our state and what we're seeing nationwide. Pleased to be talking about the landscape for electric vehicles this month. If you're just joining us now, we welcome you to say hello and where you're joining from in the chat. Hey there, Alex. Hey there, Dave. Hey there, Ed. Okay, I'll continue to let folks in from the waiting room, but I think we can go ahead and get started now. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is McKenna Sellers. I'm the Executive Director for Montana Renewable Energy Association. Pleased to be bringing you the Exploring Energy series today. So the Exploring Energy series, for those who might be joining us for the very first time, it's a monthly webinar series hosted by Montana Renewable Energy Association. We hold these at lunchtime on the first Wednesday of the month at noon o'clock Mountain, where we tackle renewable energy technology, the latest trends in energy development, and trends for the future of our energy system. So you can tune in on April 3rd for the next Exploring Energy series. If you'd like to know more about these topics and what we're doing with Exploring Energy, I will share a little bit more about that on our website in the chat. So we have an archive of all the past presentations from Exploring Energy on MREA's YouTube channel. We've been doing these for just over 2 years now, so we've been building quite the library. Last month, for February, we had one of our biggest Exploring Energy webinar audiences on record, where we were tackling direct pay, which is a new federal tax credit monetization structure for nonprofits and non-tax liable entities to cover some of the costs of their clean energy projects. So if that sounds enticing to you, or if perhaps you missed last month, you can see last month, as well as all of our other Exploring Energy series webinars on the Montana Renewable Energy Association YouTube page. So a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. We ask that you please keep yourself muted during the presentation. There will be opportunities for question and discussion at the end. Attendees, you can submit your questions directly in our chat function at any time. And this presentation will be about 40 minutes long. So if we don't get to your question in time, please do email us at info@montanarenewables.org. We'll make sure to get you an answer. This session is being recorded and will be available to registrants later this week. So we talked a little bit about who MREA is. We're a membership organization made up of renewable energy consumers, supporters, and industry professionals that are making a difference in our clean energy economy. And if you're not yet a member, I invite you to take the next step, become a member of Montana Renewable Energy Association as we make the clean energy transition possible here in Montana. And one final announcement, if you're in the Billings area, we have opened up our volunteering opportunity to be a power shift planner this year for our flagship event, the Montana Clean Energy Fair. 2025, we're headed back to Billings, Montana with our summer event. Happens in August. We bring together all of the renewable energy professionals, consumers, and folks in our clean energy sector to talk about what's happening. We have day-long workshops. It's just a great opportunity to be connected in the network. So if you're in the Billings area, interested in being a Clean Energy Power Shift Planner this year with MREA, we invite you to take a look at that, and the deadline to do so is June 3rd. All right, so stop sharing here. So our webinar today is centered on electric vehicles and the EV landscape in Montana. Who better to bring in to answer some of those questions than our very own Neal Ullman. Neal Ullman is an energy resource professional with the Montana Department of Environmental Quality Energy Office. His work is centered on clean energy transportation funding opportunities, including school bus replacements, EV charging station deployment, and more at DEQ. His previous work on clean energy issues has been at the state legislature. He's been an energy policy advisor to a member of Congress, and also worked for the National Clean Cities Program at the U.S. Department of Energy. So we're really pleased and excited to have Neal Ullman. Please welcome, and we'll get this started.
Thanks, McKenna. Thank you, everyone, for participating today. It's a really great turnout. I appreciate your time and interest. I'm hoping that I'll be able to get through the presentation in a fairly regular order and be able to answer as many questions as I can. If you do have questions during the course, if there's something that I say that doesn't make sense, which will probably happen, or if there's an acronym that I don't define, feel free to jump in and ask me what I'm talking about. There have been a lot of developments recently in the electric vehicle world. I do want to talk generally speaking about the state of play in Montana with electric vehicles that we all could use, may use, I use in our day-to-day lives, but also focus more on some of the more recent news on electric school buses and how well they're performing in Montana and where they're performing or will be coming in the near future. So I'll go ahead and there we go. For the last couple of years, DEQ has worked with the Motor Vehicles Division of the Department of Justice to get VIN number information and then run it through a system with an entity called Atlas EV Hub. You can see their website below. Atlas has a pretty sophisticated tool where they can run VIN numbers through their system and be able to determine the year, make, and model of electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Plug-in hybrids, of course, are the kind that can run on an electric motor using just electricity, but can also use gasoline to power that electric motor. So PHEVs and EVs. This particular map from Atlas is from December of 22. Unfortunately, I only just recently found out that in working with MVD that as they're converting over to a new system that all of us will tangentially be aware of as we're registering our cars year in and year out. Some of the vehicles, many of the vehicles, I think, may be not properly identified in there. For example, a Chevy Volt, starting with a V, plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, can run on gas or electric. I own one. DEQ owns two. And I've found that sometimes in the MVD system, they're identified as hybrids. Well, they're not kind of hybrids, but they're also kind of electrics. And I would bet dollars to donuts that some of them are also identified as gasoline vehicles. When I registered my all-electric Volkswagen ID4, the Lewis and Clark County Treasurer's Office asked me if it was an electric. I said, yeah. And she was like, oh, well, the dealer sent me information that says it's a gasoline. So I'm trying to work with MVD so we can make sure to get good data for the state as I'm doing research at DEQ, but also as MVD is tracking the accurate registration information. So this is what we got. It's around 4,500-ish total EV and PHEVs registered in the state of Montana. It's probably more than that now. I just really do see more in Helena, and we are not the leader in the state for electric vehicle registrations. That title actually goes to Flathead County, followed by Yellowstone and Gallatin counties and Missoula as well. So you can kind of see, and there are still some holes. You look at Webo, Carter, Powder River, and other counties that don't have any registered electric vehicles. There was a lot more a couple of years ago when we started doing this. So you can definitely see where the market is growing. Atlas EV Hub does keep track of sales of electric vehicles. This is for purely electric vehicles. And you can see that it's just been gradually growing throughout the last couple of years. There was some talk at the end of 2023 that the EV market was souring, that it was slowing, the EVs actually weren't the car of the future. Well, then December hit and they bounced back to their highest monthly sales of EVs in, I think, recorded history for electric vehicles. You can see the breakdown of what types of vehicles are the most popular. You can get a little bit more granular, detailed information on atlasevhub.com, their website. So again, this includes the Californias, but it does include Montanas, and we are simply seeing more EVs on the road than we used to. This is just a smattering of some of the passenger duty electric vehicles you can get right now. The one in the middle is me camping outside of Lincoln a couple summers ago with my ID4. The Fords on the left, a lot of exciting news on that front in the last week. You can see the Rivian, the Tesla, as well as a Hyundai. The Hyundai actually is still made in South Korea, but is still selling like hotcakes, even though it can't qualify for the federal $7,500 tax credit, but soon they're going to be starting to make them in South Carolina, I think. Also on the heavy and medium duty side, as I've told people before, and some of you who maybe have seen my presentations in the past, probably about 2 or 3 years ago, probably 2 years ago, all of these pictures would have been stock photos that I would have stolen from the internet. These are all Montana vehicles now. Through the state's portion of the Volkswagen diesel emissions settlement, we have helped fund that red electric transit bus for the University of Montana, that blue electric transit bus for Mountain Line, that white and green street sweeper for the town of Superior and the city of Helena, and electric school buses across the state, which I'll get into more. That one happens to be up in Big Timber, and then an electric pushback tractor for the Missoula Airport Authority, as well as 3 electric powered belt loaders. So there's more and more coming. They're not just passenger vehicles anymore. They're also doing bigger jobs across the state. Right now, if you're not driving a Tesla, and Teslas make up about 75% of the total electric vehicle registrations in the state of Montana, maybe 70. This is what you're looking at for fast charging opportunities. This is from plugshare.com. And, there's this little gap in there that we call central Montana, and as well as northeastern Montana. For a while, the furthest east fast charger that was available to me as a Volkswagen driver was Gardner. That is not what we call East Montana. So now the fact that all these other chargers have popped up in the real Eastern Montana with others under construction as we speak is exciting. But now with last week's announcement from Ford that they are providing free adapters to Ford electric vehicle owners, that's the top picture there, so that Ford vehicles can use the Tesla superchargers. It's very exciting news and opens up a lot of different possibilities. You can see, if I go back and forth a couple times, the extra options that there are for people who now have access to Tesla superchargers. I know that there's at least a couple of Mach-E's and F-150 Lightnings here in Helena, and I know that there's some utilities that own F-150 Lightnings across the state co-ops. And so that's very exciting. And then, of course, Tesla has been able to, for a couple of years, in addition to their supercharger network, use this adapter on the bottom to be able to use non-Tesla fast charging plugs. So the chargers that I have to use, Teslas can also use with this adapter. I think if you're a Tesla owner, you have to pay maybe $150, $200 for that adapter, but it also opens up more possibilities for you. So the idea after last year in 2023, pretty much every OEM, every vehicle manufacturer announced that they were going to go over to the Tesla-shaped plug. And for people like me that already purchased an electric vehicle that doesn't have the Tesla-shaped port in it, we should all be getting adapters like the one on the top that Ford owners already have access to over the next, we'll say, year or so. According to Tesla's website, next in line after Ford is GM drivers, Rivian, Polestar, and Volvo. And so I would imagine that Volkswagen, Hyundai, Kia, Stellantis, Chrysler, Jeep would all be in line somewhere after that. So again, it opens up a lot more possibilities. When you're charging, the one thing I like to talk about, especially since this is the Montana Renewable Energy Association, is how clean is your fuel that you're actually putting into your electric vehicle. Well, in Montana, it's actually not that bad. You can see here the baseline for any gasoline vehicle that the U.S. Department of Energy uses across the country is that you're probably with a pure gasoline vehicle emitting about, I think it's 12 or 13,000 pounds of CO2 annually if you're driving 15,000 miles a year. With a hybrid like your regular Toyota Prius, that drops considerably because they're much more efficient vehicles on average. If you're using a plug-in hybrid, then they're starting to get a little bit more sophisticated because you are driving on gasoline. My Volt, when I drive it to Great Falls or Missoula or wherever, I'm driving on gasoline. And then when I hit town, I switch over to electric so that I don't pollute the air in the urban areas. So you are still using some emissions there. And then when you're on all electric, zero tailpipe emissions, but the emissions for your electricity, for your fuel did come from somewhere. And here in Montana, we do still have a significant amount of coal. power generation, but we also have a huge amount of hydro and also growing wind. This data is from 2022, so it might be a little bit dated based off of development since then. But when you compare it to some other states like our neighbors down to the south in Wyoming, where they have a lot more coal fire generation, the CO2 emissions are significantly increased. So, but then also, and I saw a couple of folks that registered for this call or this webinar that are from co-op country, especially in Western Montana, where you're part of the Bonneville Power Administration's portfolio of power generation. I think that you can say that your electric vehicle, if you're charging up in co-op country in Western Montana, that you're probably about 97% carbon free. And obviously that comes with a huge amount of hydropower, a lot of wind and solar, some nuclear thrown in there for fun. But they're even cleaner out there. But even generally average across the state of Montana, Northwestern MDU co-ops, wherever you happen to live as a customer, it's pretty clean, which is very exciting. In Montana, on the heavier duty side, electric school buses are getting more and more attention. DEQ helped fund with our portion of the Volkswagen settlement funds, the first in the state electric school buses in Havre. Havre's 2 electric school buses have been operating for just over a year now. And since then, the buses that we helped fund for first student school bus service down in Billings, as well as the EPA-funded school buses that were deployed in Big Fork, Clinton, and Fairfield are now all operational and serving routes and taking kids to and from school, and even some activities. The additional notes there that are primarily all in Western Montana, January, the EPA announced its latest round of clean school bus funding, and they awarded 41 buses to 7 different school districts in Western Montana. You can see down there that was for Dixon, Florence Carlton, Hamilton, Plains, St. Regis, Thompson Falls, and Trout Creek. The East Helena one is one that DEQ funded that we've been having issues with the manufacturer getting that bus built, but I'm hopeful that it'll arrive in the next month or 2. But you can see here that from going from 0 electric school buses just less than a year and a half ago to where we're at now and will be this summer and for the start of the next school year is very exciting. Havre's buses, actually, because they went into service first, we have the most data on. We're providing technical assistance to those first 6 school districts, Big Fork, Billings, Clinton, Fairfield, Havre, and East Helena, on planning to deploy those buses. The Havre buses, and then also the Big Fork and Clinton buses, deployed at probably the worst possible time in the winter when we got those massive cold snaps. The first cold snap in December of 22, and then also the cold snap that we had in December, January, just a couple months ago. In Havre, what we found for the first half of last year before school let out for the summer, they have a diverse fleet. They have a couple of gasoline-powered buses. They have a number of diesels, I think 10 or a dozen or so, and then the 2 electrics. And when you average the cost, the fuel cost per mile of the electric is half almost of what the diesel bus is, because electricity rates stay generally very stable. They stay very flat, whereas seasonally, and depending on the type of diesel, especially also whether you're talking about summer or winter blend, the prices can fluctuate quite a bit, as we all getting ready to pack up into the car and take the family out for 4th of July. Gas prices coincidentally happen to be extremely higher during that time of the year, but electricity prices stay the same. So your fuel prices stay the same, which means you can plan a lot easier instead of having to look into the crystal ball of how much fuel costs are going to be at any particular time of the school year. So that's one very exciting thing that we found. I generally am still saying, that electric school buses are not what you put the football team into and drive to the state championships across the state. They're not activity buses, but like I said, Big Fork, Havre, they might be the only ones so far. I don't think Clinton or Fairfield has done this yet, but they're close enough to some of their regular activities that they have taken them out on activities with the students, and the students enjoy it. In fact, to begin this school year, The Havre Public School Board always takes a tour of all the school facilities across the city. And this year they insisted on using the electric school bus to do that. So that was a lot of excitement there for them. I do, again, because it's MREA, and I like to tout my 2 electric cars plus the solar panels that I had an MREA member install. These can be near solar powered cars on average. Now, obviously, I'm generally charging them during the night when I'm asleep. I'm not in a hurry to drive anywhere. I don't have to make an emergency run to the grocery store. But I have 4.56 kilowatt capacity charger or solar panels on my roof, and based off of 15,000 miles of driving, the efficiency of my cars, you can see that I have not quite enough to be able to 100% cover my 2 electric cars, but I'm pretty close. So I can say that I'm using pretty much solar powered cars, which is very exciting. And if you want to plug in this calculation down below, like McKenna said, we'll have this webinar up on the MREA website later on, so you can kind of copy this and see if it makes sense for, the solar panels you have in the cars that you might be looking at. There's a lot of funding out there right now. The tax credits are one thing that are immediately available to people. So depending on the type of vehicle that you're looking for, make and model, you may qualify either for none of the tax credit, half of it, or the full $7,500. Also, if you're looking to get into something for your place of business, a delivery van, or a work truck. Again, I mentioned that some electric utilities own Ford F-150 Lightnings, either for show or maybe they're actually putting them to work. I hope they are. And so there's also a commercial clean vehicle tax credit that you may also apply for. If you're looking to put in a charger in your garage, depending on where you live, they brought back the alternative fuel vehicle refueling property credit. It's a mouthful, but it's basically a tax credit for your home charger. It's also for commercial chargers as well, if you're looking to install it at a hotel or a grocery store, whatever the place of business is. Also, local governments can take advantage of these things. So whether you're a school district, municipality, county, or something else, through the direct pay system, if you're, for example, wanting to add a fleet card for work travel so that you're not having to use your own personal car or rental car. If you want to, get a Tesla for your fleet, drive it for work meetings, you can still get that $7,500 tax credit. You just have to do it through a different system than I would as an individual taxpayer. But you can get it through the direct pay system. You can visit irs.gov, this link below, for more information. The EPA is about to probably next month make another announcement on more clean school bus funding awards for electric school buses primarily. There'll be another funding opportunity, I think, that opens up this summer. Also, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, NEVI, Formula Grant Program, we're still working on with MDT to get that up and running and hopefully have a funding opportunity out sometime in the next couple of months. But you can look at all these things primarily through the Federal Highway Administration, the EPA, and for more detail on how and when those funding opportunities will show up. This is my contact information. My coworker, actually now my boss, Kyla Mackey, has also been involved in our clean vehicle technology programs. So happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Neal. Short, sweet, so much good content. We have a couple of questions from the chat that we can start with, and then from there, as people are thinking through what Neal just presented to us, you can put your questions in the chat or even just a request to come off mute, and then we can have more of a verbal discussion. But we'll start with the first question comes from Dave. It actually pertains to, I think, your second slide in the slide deck, Neal, with the MDV data that's presented on Atlas EV, that it shows there's more models, makes and models than total number of EVs. And would you have any insight as to why that might be, or why there might be a data question on that? You're on mute there, Neal.
3 years, you think I would have learned? I don't know is the answer, Dave. This is something generated by Atlas EV Hub. I always use Volkswagen ID4 since I own it and I know the most about it. There's, I think, 6 different trims of that one make and model. There's the all-wheel drive, not all-wheel drive, the smaller battery, the bigger battery. So that could be part of it. I don't know. But that would be Atlas. And I think that if you get to this portion of their page, you can click on the blue lettering there, vehicle models, and see what it is they're talking about. Sorry, I don't have a better answer.
That's all right. Ken just added in the chat that the way that Atlas EV Hub presents their information, that it looks like it's a global, like, accumulation of makes and models regardless of state. So while the EV on the road key stat would be pertaining to Montana, perhaps the vehicle make and model would be a bigger data set. Question from Lori, I believe it was answered in the chat though discussion here. Can you get a supercharger adapter for the 2019 Chevy Bolt? Sounds like other manufacturers will be filling in with supercharger adapters in the coming months, but the only one that we know for sure is Ford. Is that accurate, Neal?
Yeah, right now the only people that can get it, I think they're made by Tesla. So like when me as a Volkswagen driver or you as a Bolt driver, I assume, I know Judeman's on the call too, that it looks like GM is supposed to get them this spring, according to Tesla's website. So I don't know how GM's going to do, if they're going to be as benevolent as Ford and give them away for free if you're going to have to pay something. I think that the cost for them would be around $200-ish. I'm not entirely sure, but you're next in line. You're ahead of me, which I'm very jealous about.
Thanks, Neal. And a question from Alex. Can we get a copy of the electric school bus deployment in Montana, the list of those currently in service and those coming in 2024 to share with their school board members? Yes, we can absolutely get that to you. And we can share that in the follow-up email to this presentation. And you also have access to this recording.
I mentioned Alex very briefly, but I'll go into a little bit more detail about another resource that will be available to you hopefully this fall. Is because DEQ funded the first in the state electric school buses, and electric school buses, the primary service obviously is to get kids safely to and from schools and not deal with all this Star Trek technology stuff. Is we wanted to make sure that we didn't just throw a bunch of money at them and wish them the best of luck. We wanted to give them some technical assistance so that they're not distracted from their primary goal of transporting kids, and but then they can do it in the most efficient way possible with the best plan. And so we've been offering this technical assistance now for the last year or so. And I'll tell you the conversation that I had on my monthly call with Big Fork just today is that they just started, now that the cold isn't quite so severe. I mean, it's still in the 20s or 30s, whatever. But they just started, now that they're getting a little bit more familiar with their Lion Electric C school bus, is they stopped charging it during the middle of the day when the students are in class. And so after they do their morning run, the battery state of charge is, they start off at 100% every morning. After the morning route, they're down to about 80%. But with any electric vehicle, you always have regenerative braking. But when you're at 100%, which basically means that it uses the heat friction to generate electricity to put fuel back into your battery. So you're almost literally refueling as you brake. But you can't do that when you're at 100% state of charge, because you're at 100%. You can't add more electricity to 100%. And so what they found is that the regenerative braking gets more aggressive in the bus the lower the state of charge. And so when they do their afternoon routes, starting off at 80%, they're getting the benefits of that regenerative braking and basically cutting down even more on their fuel costs. They already have a super cheap source of fuel, being Flathead Electric Co-op members, but now they're getting basically free electricity, free fuel by braking. And so that's one fun thing. I know that Clinton and Havre have already been doing that as well. So as we're doing that, once the school year wraps up, our consultants and I will be working on that report, and hopefully by the beginning of the school year, we'll have that report to share on lessons learned for Montana school buses in those 6 districts, probably 5 in the end. But we'll make sure to put that up on our website. So stay tuned for further updates on that, Alex.
Awesome. Thanks, Neal. Looking through the chat here, there's a question related to Northwestern Energy and Town Pump working on a fast charge DCFC project. And if you would happen to know the status of that or any details on that front, figure you're the right person to ask, Neal.
Sure, Kevin. So that project was funded in part also by our Volkswagen diesel emission settlement dollars. We made that award in January of 21, I believe. And for the Northwestern Award, we awarded them funding for a single DC fast charger and then a single dual port level 2 charger at 9 town pump locations across their service territory. For a variety of reasons, it's taken longer than expected to get that project off the ground. I've been in touch with them a little bit this last couple of weeks, and I'm hopeful that by the time construction season starts in the spring, that we'll be able to get that project up and running. It was supposed to be completed in December of last year. We extended the deadline until November of this year. And I think that they're hopeful, and I'm hopeful also that we can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time and have multiple locations under construction simultaneously so we can meet that deadline of this fall. So that's the hope there. We did award funding to Town Pump specifically. Primarily, Northwestern wasn't a part of that, I think, because some of those locations were in co-op country, not Northwestern's service territory. In the end, Town Pump decided not to move forward with those locations. So right now with the Northwestern project in partnership with Town Pump, I'm hopeful they'll move forward soon.
Seeing some questions here, and we've been talking a lot about fleet electrification, whether that be for corporations or municipalities. There's a question from Daniel. If I'm a school administrator, for example, I'm thinking about simple payback. So do you or can you speak to, especially maybe Havre being a good example, can you provide the estimated payback years for school bus electrification with grant help and without grant help, given the overhead that a lot of our rural schools and limited budgets?
Sure, that's a good question. And I'll be honest also too on this, Daniel. I've been with DEQ now for just over 4 years doing this clean transportation work, and over the 4 years we've had access to funding from the EPA's Diesel Emission Reduction Act program, DERA, which we've been doing for the better part of 15 some odd years before my time and during it. And with DERA, we primarily have been doing diesel to diesel replacements, although there's a lot more interest recently on diesel to propane replacements. We can do diesel to electric. And I have analyzed, but unfortunately so before I get into that, in my 4 years, I have seen a substantial increase of the cost of any type of fuel bus. When I started, you could get into a brand new diesel school bus for $90 on the low end, $1,000. If you added a couple of bells and whistles or safety features, you might get up over 100. Now I'm seeing them at about 120, 130. Propane buses are about the same. Electric school buses have always been significantly more expensive. Right now, all in with the safety features and a charger, it's around 400, depending on the make and model. So they are significantly more expensive. So without grant funding, unless you were to keep that electric school bus in service for decades longer than your diesel, I can't imagine any scenario where there's a reasonable payback, just to be perfectly honest with you. So it does really require grant funding or the direct pay assistance through the IRS to make it work. Even with the DERA funding, where that program limits us to a maximum 45% cost share, so the school district would be on the hook for 55% of the cost, and DEQ through the DERA funds could pay for 45%. Some schools I was able to make it pencil out so that they kind of broke even over 7 years. Some you just can't because your maintenance budget is so low for whatever reason. Now with Big Fork, as an example, they got that bus entirely paid for by the EPA's program. So free pencils out pretty quickly. And then in addition to that, they're paying, I think, like 6 cents per kilowatt hour, which is less than me as Northwestern Service Territory um, um, ratepayer. So they're already making huge savings on their fuel right there. With Haver, with the Volkswagen funding that we gave them, they basically ended up getting into each of those buses for about $55,000. So about half of what they would have paid for a new diesel. So again, that's already going to pay off pretty quickly because they're like I said, their per mile fuel costs for their electrics is almost half of what their diesels are. So it doesn't, in terms of the actual payback for that 55,000, I don't know when they'll reach that, but it's already saving the school district money because they didn't have to pay another 50 some odd $1,000 extra for a new diesel, and also their fuel costs are less. So it's a pretty good deal.
Okay, excellent questions and engagement in the chat. Thank you for folks weighing in. So there's a question from Alex about who are the alternative energy alternative transportation champions out there. And I apologize if I'm putting you guys on the spot, but one of our partners is Yellowstone Teton Clean Cities, incredible organization. We've got, I think, both Jesse and Alicia on the call today. So if you don't mind us calling you out really briefly to share a little bit about your organization, I'm thinking about the EV ambassadors, and if you're looking for clean energy champions and alternative transportation champions in Montana, I say look to the front runners, and why Yellowstone Teton Clean Cities, or YTCC, is doing a lot of the legwork on that. So Jesse, would you be willing to make a few remarks?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I was actually in Havre this weekend. I met with Woody. I checked out the electric school buses again for 1 year update. One's not working because the diesel heater is malfunctioning, so it's not working. Yeah, I was up there. We work with everyone across Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming for alternative fuels, renewable diesel, propane, easy EV charging, and all of that. Alicia's here. She's working with Wyoming on some clean school bus stuff as well. But yeah, we have a lot of resources. We visited a lot of the sites that have new vehicles, alternative fuel vehicles. Billings has CNG garbage trucks. Havre has the electric school buses. Bozeman has propane school buses. So we're connected, and we're boots on the ground with a lot of the people in our region. Willing to help, willing to do fleet analysis for anybody who's interested. I've been promoting renewable diesel. That's a huge one. Maybe we'll give a talk here in the future. That's about it. If somebody has any questions for me?
Thanks, Jesse. And I did see in your this month's newsletter that you're collecting fleet electrification success stories or alternative transportation success stories from 2023. But in that newsletter, you also provided the list of those in Montana that are already a part of the fleet success stories. So that would be something that I think this group could be interested in.
Yeah, we are also part of a grant, a Drive Electric USA grant, where we are for both Montana and Idaho, or sorry, Montana and Wyoming. And that's a new program we're starting to work with. So you can contact us about that, but that's for EV drivers across the street. We're trying to set up a little advisory committee. We have an initial one started, but that's going to spread EV adoption and information throughout the state.
Another question here from Virginia related to the slide on statewide energy resources, just generation, not necessarily usage. I know you put that caveat in there, Neal. If northwestern Montana uses so much more hydro, do central and eastern end up using more coal than the statewide average shown in the slide?
I think the short answer, because I don't know all the details, is probably yes. But I was talking to Kyla not too long ago, and we did notice that some of the co-ops in that part of the state are cleaner than they would have been a couple of years ago, cleaner from a carbon emissions perspective, I guess, more accurately. So yeah, I think everybody across the board is probably using more of those types of energy generation. Again, the DOE tool I kind of consider a blunt object instead of a scalpel. It's talking about generation in Montana, not the actual energy that we use. And so, and that'll also change again. Like if you're in my house, you're using solar power during the day. I think at night, I probably mostly use hydropower. Um, so, yeah, it's going to change from region to region and time of day and whatnot. But yeah, there have been, from a carbon emissions perspective, according to the DOE tool, there have been improvements over the last couple of years since I first noticed this tool.
Question about data, and this can go beyond Montana, but question from Karen here about is there any data being collected from cities that have electrified their fleets and published information on cost savings, or how the conversion process has gone? And I'm wondering if there's any leaders out there nationally that have collected that data, or perhaps YTCC might have some drive electric folks we could refer to if we're looking for information like that.
I would say, Karen, that first for Montana, the only municipal electric vehicles that I'm aware of are, besides the F-150 Lightnings for the city of Bozeman that Jesse flagged in the chat, are probably the transit buses. So Mountain Line Transit over in Missoula, and then for you, Met Transit, with the 4, I think, electric school or transit buses that they're have. I'm not sure if they've been delivered yet. And though both of those municipalities, the transit agencies, got those through the Federal Transit Administration's Low-No program. And it's my understanding that, and so up until recently, up until the census, only Billings, Great Falls, and Missoula have been eligible for that in Montana. I think that sometime in the nearish future, Helena and Bozeman may be added to that list. But those are only transit buses. And I'm not aware of, well, I mean, the city of Helena has a Volt, so that's not a lot. They have the electric street sweeper. But yeah, there's not really a whole lot that we can look to right now, but there might be national stuff if you contact Jesse and Alicia through the ytcleancities.org website.
Seeing a couple questions on life cycle and environmental impact. We hear a lot about lithium mining, and wondering, Neal, if there's any information out there in your research about the impact of lithium ion batteries compared to ICE vehicles, if we're talking environmental impact and CO2.
Yeah, and like everything, you kind of have to caveat any of that. So my 2021 Volkswagen ID4 was made in Germany. They're now being made in Chattanooga. Even with it coming from Germany, folks in the EV industry were guesstimating that for the shipment and whatnot via ship, rail, then truck in order to get to Bozeman, it would have taken me 15,000 some odd miles for me to kind of net out my emissions from all of that, including, I think, the battery. But now the cars are being made in Chattanooga. So if I were to buy a Chattanooga car, then it would simply get railed over here, I think, instead of having to go on a big shipping container. So that would cut down the emissions. And those batteries, I think, are also being made domestically, because Volkswagen was the first, and maybe up until today or yesterday, the only foreign automaker that fully qualified for the $7,500 vehicle EV tax credit. So, depending on, if you look at the window sticker for my ID4, it did say that I think a lot of the battery components came from China, which I'm not terribly happy about, but I wanted to be an early adopter. I think it's different now. I think that it's coming from other parts of the world where hopefully it's being sourced more responsibly. The one thing I do like to talk about, though, is also that my car is powered by Montana Energy. We do have oil refineries here in Montana, but it's my understanding that a lot of the oil that we get for our vehicles comes from Canada, which is not necessarily a hostile country, but if you're talking about made in America, it's not. I think that a lot of our oil does come from American production, but mine is from Montana, whether it's the hydropower from our dams, the solar panels on my roof, or even from Colstrip. It is Montana made energy, so I do like talking about that. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of split that baby. There's some good videos that I've seen also kind of demonstrating that even when you take into account some of that it does, after a certain number of miles of driving, net out. To Juneman's question, to Mark's question about states that might even have more coal-fired energy production than Montana does. I knew that someone would ask that question because I deleted the slide. I used to show that same slide from DOE's website for Wyoming that, again, has significantly higher coal-fired generation than Montana does. And yes, it is just barely slightly cleaner to have, from a carbon emissions perspective, to have an electric vehicle than it is to have a plug-in hybrid electric or a gasoline-powered car. And I looked also at West Virginia and Kentucky, and the same can be said there. I think they even have higher amounts of coal-fired generation than Wyoming does. So even there, yes, it is still slightly cleaner. Not there's a significant drop off when you look at Montana. It's even bigger when you look at either the Dakotas or Idaho, because they have so much wind and hydro as a percentage compared to Montana, that it's even cleaner in those three states. But here in Montana, it's pretty clean, and I enjoy that.
Thanks, Neal. I think that was a really thorough explanation. Daniel asks about hydrogen fueling stations, and actually that's an excellent primer because we'll be having the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub folks in St. Regis and also other parts of the Pacific Northwest, a project that was awarded federal funding. They will be talking about that project and their plans. So while we might not yet have a statewide or national implementation plan that I'm aware of, we're excited to bring the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub stakeholders and project implementers to tell us more about how that might pertain to Montana. So coming soon to your inbox at the next Exploring Energy series. Okay, we covered all of the questions in the chat. Do others have questions?
There's one.
Go ahead.
There's one from Lori. I just wanted to clarify, Lori, about the Western Montana school buses. So Harlow's. I can never keep them straight. Harlow's bus service, which is basically the sales dealership for international school buses based in Missoula, applied last summer to the EPA's Clean School Bus Grant Program. It was their first round of grants. And there's a difference there, is that the Big Four Clinton and Fairfield school buses got funded through the rebate program, which according to the EPA is supposed to be geared towards smaller school districts, because with the grant program, the minimum number of school buses that you have to apply to replace is 25, which is nearly impossible for almost every school district in Montana. When you look at the school bus fleets in Helena and Billings that are all operated by First Student. I know First Student has applied for funding unsuccessfully so far. We'll see what happens next month. But most other, smaller school districts, especially the ones I just mentioned in Big Four, Clinton, and Fairfield. Big Fork, I think, has 4. Fairfield has 7. Clinton has 6 or 8. So they can't even, they're not even eligible to apply. So the sales dealership over in Missoula applied on behalf of all of those other smaller school districts. So like I said, Thompson Falls, Hamilton, Chalk Creek, and others that individually would not have been eligible to apply. So he applied on their behalf. They're all going to be getting international school buses like the ones that DEQ funded for First Student down in Billings that are in operation right now. So it was the EPA and also that partnership that kind of chose, if you will, Lori, the geographical distribution of those. DEQ is not getting any more VW funding unless we steal it from another state, which we won't know if that can happen for another couple of years. So in this next round of EPA rebate awards that'll be announced in April, it's purely a lottery system. I mean, they're almost literally drawing names from a hat. I think it's balls from a spinner or whatever. Not terribly scientific. Anyway, we'll see how it is. That'll be pure chance, just like it was for Big Fort Clinton and Fairfield a year ago, on how well those geographically are distributed. So I'm hoping the best. I do constantly tell EPA, hey, Region 8's kind of lagging behind. Wouldn't it be nice to get some more cheddar out here? But I don't work for the EPA, so we'll see.
More to come. Going from EPA back to State DEQ Energy Office, does DEQ have any direct projects that are focused on increasing level 2 charging at hotels and tourism locations?
Yeah, thanks for that, Susan. So DEQ's, the only funding that we have for this is the Volkswagen settlement funds. And as part of that national settlement, it said that beneficiaries like DEQ could spend up to 15% of our allocation on EV charging infrastructure, publicly available. Like I paid for the chargers for Havre and for First Student and for East Helena, but for publicly available, 15%. So for Montana, that equals about $1.89 million. We have around $600-ish thousand still to spend. So to me, spending more on DC fast charging projects like we funded Northwestern, as well as Missoula Electric, as well as the Sinclair gas station down in Gardner, doesn't make a lot of sense, especially with all the bipartisan infrastructure law money flowing down from the federal government. So that is one idea that we're kicking around, Susan, is what's the other gap, the other need that needs to be filled for EV drivers like myself? I certainly book hotels based on whether or not there's an EV charger, even if I'm driving my Volt where I can get gas a lot quicker than I can charge up. I do like starting the day with a full charge when I'm traveling in my Volt. And so, yeah, and I think a lot of other EV drivers are the same. So we are thinking about it, more to come. Sign up for our email distribution list on DEQ's Alternative Fuels and Transportation website. We'll probably make an announcement through that when we're ready to go, but we don't have a timeline right now.
Thanks, Neal. And I'll try and go in and find that DEQ website link and make sure we have it in the chat for those to view. Question from David that I might just broaden a little bit. If you are a citizen and want to engage your local government both on fleet electrification and or measuring emissions of your current fleet status, whether you're a larger town or smaller municipality or local government, what might you recommend?
I think my wife, having been a former city commissioner, I think, come budget season, providing that input, saying you guys should prioritize that for those of you who live in communities, municipalities that have adopted climate action plans or some other named type document, Missoula, Helena, Red Lodge, Livingston, Bozeman, those are the ones off the top of my head, have all done that. Billings doesn't, but they also managed to become a LEED certified city. So they're doing something right. And so I would just say, like during budget season or individually meeting with your city commissioners or even the staff that may be operating those vehicles, tell them, here's what's available out there. Again, the direct pay can help reduce the cost, whether you're talking about a passenger style vehicle or a commercial vehicle. If your municipality has a Ford Transit delivery van, they can get into that and get up to $40,000 on the incremental cost of going from an ICE engine to an electric. Same thing with garbage trucks, street sweepers, transit buses. You get a little, that $40,000 doesn't mean as much when you're talking about an $800,000 electric transit bus, but it's not nothing. Also, I'm hopeful that this spring, maybe we'll see, that the EPA will be announcing its clean heavy duty vehicle program. They had a public listening session just over a year ago in January. And I've been waiting with bated breath ever since then for them to announce. But the intent of that is to help fund, just like the Clean School Bus Program, the replacement of heavier duty vehicles. So I would guess that things like garbage trucks, street sweepers, and other heavy duty applications would be eligible under that. So stay tuned for that from the EPA. If you just Google EPA clean heavy duty, you should be able to find the page pretty quickly.
At that point, I think I'll stop our recording. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.